all of you paying attention. Give yourselves a big hand. Thank you. Here's a straggler. Come on in. And get that lemonade. Water. Water. All right, well, our second half. Before we begin, I would like to say that one of our contestants could not be here because of an illness in her family. So, Keita Kelly, we wish her, lots of progress with her husband and Rachel's father. So, keep good thoughts going there for them, and we'll hear her story maybe next year. All right. Our next storyteller is Rachel Kelly. Rachel is from Tonganoxie. And some of us know a fellow who tells stories out in Tonganoxie. We call him Tonganoxie Tim, the tire man. But Rachel, I saw her tell and heard her tell at Downs in the Tall Tale Contest. All right. No, you're not that tall.
I'm not that strong.
And not that strong. There it is.
All right, buddy, you ready? Go on a canoe trip, they said. It'll be relaxing. It's just what you need. I got that call about a week ago. My mom called me up and she said, Rachel, we're going on a canoe trip. You, your sister, your dad, and I are all going to go canoeing down the Niangua River. When she said that, I thought, well, I've never been canoeing down a river before, and thoughts of drowning, snakes, and sunburns flashed across my eyes. But she talked me into it. So I loaded up my gear, my fishing pole, my life jacket, and my clothes for the weekend, and we headed off. When we got to the canoe site, we were getting our canoes in the water. The guide let us know that there would be different fishing banks along the way, picnic beaches and whatnot, for us to stop and pull off. And there would also be flags along the way, keeping us on our journey down towards the departure site. And we wanted to make sure that we stayed within those flags, because if we had veered off and took the wrong fork in the river, we would surely go over the dam. Go on a canoe trip, they said. It'll be relaxing. It's just what you need. So we got our canoes in the water, and as you can see, I'm not the smallest of people. Getting in that canoe was no easy task. I put my right foot in, and before you know it, I toppled over backwards, landing flat on my back in the middle of the river. After the third try, I made it in safely. So here we were, going down the river, and we found our first fishing spot. And we pulled over to the side, and I casted in my line, and my dad casted in his line. And before you know it, I looked over at my dad, and he's catching rainbow trout after rainbow trout. He's always said it's his lucky fishing pool. But I knew I was going to catch something, so I casted in my line, and I was reeling and pulling and reeling. And I caught a twig. I cast it again, and I was reeling and pulling, and I caught some trash off the bottom of the river. Everything but a fish. And as I was looking over at my dad and grumbling, he said, okay, let's go downriver a little further and see if we can't find a spot where you can catch a fish as well. Go on a canoe trip, they said. It'll be relaxing. It's just what you need. So as we're going downriver a little further, we started, the water got a little bit faster, and we were starting to hit the rapids. But then the rapids got a little bit bigger. And I got a little bit more scared. And these weren't just, these weren't the gentle rapids, these were huge rapids, and I was an inexperienced canoeer and afraid of drowning. And before you know it, there is a rock smack in the middle of the river. And boy, did I hit that rock. I did not only hit that rock, I shot over the rock, capsizing not only my canoe, but my sister's and my dad's canoe as well. All of our stuff was floating downriver, and I, swimming frantically, trying not to drown, was trying to grab on to all of our belongings. And I managed to grab onto my dad's lucky fishing pole. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with the fishing pole and how that was going to get me back to the beach. But I tried to cast it because I was going to snag onto a tree because I was really good at that. So I cast it as hard as I could, and I landed right on the beach, right on top of an umbrella of fellow picnickers. So as I reeled in, I managed to bring in their umbrella, and now I had a fishing pole in my right hand, an umbrella in my left hand, and I was still frantically floating downstream. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to keep trying, so I cast again. This time I landed right in the fisherman's boat. But I didn't just land in his boat, I landed right on the tab of his can of beer. And as I reeled and pulled, right out of the ice cold cooler, I reeled myself in a nice cold beer. Now I had a fishing pole in my right hand, an umbrella in my left hand, and an ice cold can of beer tucked under my armpit. This was not working. I knew at that moment I didn't need something, I needed someone. And right about that minute, I realized just as we were leaving that unlucky fishing spot, it couldn't have been about a mile upstream, there was a whole bunch of gorgeous 35-year-old men pulling in, getting ready to cast out their lines. And I thought, So I took my line and I tossed it as hard and as far as I could upstream. And I started reeling and pulling and tugging. This was not a tree limb. And I'm pulling, and before you know it, I had a gorgeous 35-year-old man right there in front of me. But I looked at him and I said, "Sir, I've got a fishing pole in my right hand, an umbrella in my left hand, and an ice cold can of beer into my armpit. There is no way I can hold on to you." And he looked at me and he said, "Don't worry, sweetie, I'll hold on to you." And about that moment, we both looked up, and right at the crest, we had taken the wrong fork in the middle of the river, and we were headed straight towards the dam. Well, I knew we were going, so I tossed the fishing pole. I popped open the umbrella. Me in the arms of a gorgeous 35-year-old man, cracked open my ice cold beer, took a swig, and floated down peacefully. And I thought to myself, "Go on a canoe trip," they said. "It'll be relaxing. It's just what you need."
And you didn't hurt that foot on that canoe trip, did you?
That's next year's story.
Well, that's all right. Well, in this Liars Contest, if you pay your fee, you can tell as many stories as you want. Somebody said if they turned in at least 3 stories, they might win first, second, and third place. And our next storyteller thinks he might win first and second, I think. So let's welcome Gary Kuntz again to the floor.
About that much slower. It was my job at my grandparents' farm to gather eggs. Every time we would go to my grandparents' farm, for some reason they thought me, knowing nothing about farms, had to have a job, and it was always gather eggs. My dad was in the military, and we spent a lot of time overseas. And we'd be gone for 3 years and then come back, and he would save his leave up. So we would spend 30, sometimes 45 days at my grandparents' farm. When I was 8 years old, we showed up there and they handed me the wire basket and I got to go gather eggs. And gathering eggs, not too bad of a job. They had this really huge chicken yard. They had one hen house, but the hens could lay eggs wherever they want. And I had to go check around all the corners because sometimes those eggs would get to maturity. And about my third day there, I'm walking into the hen house, grab a bunch of eggs, walk back out, walking around the yard, and I see a group of hens, and they're pecking at something. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and they're just pecking. I'm thinking, what's going on? It's either got to be a really good worm, or maybe a snake, or something that's really tasty. And I get closer, and it wasn't. It was a little baby chick. What I call a peeper. And these hens were trying to peck it. But this little guy, he was tough. He wasn't having any of this stuff. Hen would come down to peck, and he'd swing his wing, pow! And surprise the thing. Another one would come up, and he'd go down with his beak and get them on their chicken toes. Apparently chicken toes are tender. I didn't know that. And they would jump back, but he was pretty well outnumbered 5-1, and they were like 4 or 5 pounds, and he was 1.5 ounces, maybe. And after watching this for a little while, I thought, I better do something because those hens are going to get hurt. So I went over and I grabbed the chick, picked it up, and it just kind of glared at me. I said, it's okay. Come with me. I grabbed my wire basket of eggs. We headed out of the chicken yard, those hens following. Closed the door. My grandma had come out of the house, and she was just watching this. I said, Grandma, what's going on? And then she explained to me what happens when hens don't like something, they henpeck it to death. She said that poor little thing is just not going to survive. Might as well just toss it back in the chicken yard. I'm 8 years old. I'm not going to do this. It's like, no, we got to save it. And my grandma was a farm lady. She didn't have a whole lot of sentiment here. And she just kind of sighed and said, okay, let me see if I can find a shoebox or something. She got a shoebox. We got some straw, put a little bit of water in a container in there, tucked it back on the porch out of the wind. And she said, we'll see how it does. Next day, that little thing was alive. Next day after that, it started hopping out of the shoebox and started following me around the chicken yard. I thought, this is not too bad. Now, I wouldn't let it come into the chicken yard because, those hens were there. Day after that, though, it slipped in. It was walking alongside me. One of those hens came up and pow! It's like, dang. And that's when I decided he needed a name. Now, this was 1959, and I was trying to think of the bravest and strongest man that I knew. And that was Tarzan. But calling a chicken Tarzan just didn't seem right, and I knew that was a trademark name and you can't use it. So I decided to call him JW. After the guy who played Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller. Johnny Weissmuller is just too much, but JW seemed like a good name for the chick. So I said, JW, come on. And he would follow with me. And things went along pretty good. We would go do things. I'd go out fishing. He'd come over there. He was really good at finding worms. Came back. And then one day, I realized something about that chicken yard. There were a whole lot of hens there, but there was only one rooster. And I made the mistake of asking my grandma about that. And she said, well, chickens lay eggs. The hens do. But the roosters, well, you only need one rooster. And what do you think Sunday dinner's been? And then I noticed that she was eyeing JW. And I figured as long as I kept him with me, it's good. But I knew I had to leave. And I thought, okay, what can I do? And that's when I decided to train him. They'd had a farm dog, but the farm dog had gone off someplace and disappeared and never came back. And so they were in between, so I decided to train JW like a farm dog. And I started with sit. If you know anything about chickens, they're low to the ground, sit works well. Then come, a little bit of chicken feed. He came right away, he was really good. stay. He took a little bit of time. It took about 30 minutes before he got that concept. No, stay there. No. Put him back there. Stay there. Roll over. Chickens like to roll over in the dirt. This is all right. Heel. Yeah, little chicken beak right next to my left knee as I walked along. He was really good at this. There was a problem with fetch. Because I picked up a stick and I wasn't really thinking, and I threw the stick and he went after it. And he caught it in midair. But the stick was about as big as he was, and it landed. And then he drug it back to me and he put it right in front of my feet, and it's like, let's do it again, come on. And I knew that wasn't enough. I had to do something. And then I realized they needed a guard dog. They're out on the farm. They don't have a dog. Why not a guard chicken? And my dad was in the Army. I knew how to do this. So I trained him to march, walk a post, to do an about face with his heel, the whole bit. Hold his wing up, stop. And I did as well as I could, and then all of a sudden it was time for us to leave. And I saw Grandma looking at him, and I thought, he's not gonna make it. I gave him a big hug before we left. My dad was stationed at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. The farm's in Iowa. We weren't gonna see them for a while. Came back for Christmas. Everybody seemed to be excited except for me. I'm in the back seat going, I didn't want to know what happened to JW. And we drove and drove and drove and drove. And finally we get there. We started heading down that long driveway. And all of a sudden I felt the car just, and my dad said, what's that stupid chicken doing in the middle of the driveway? Stupid chicken. It's got its wing up. Wait, I looked out and jumped out of the car. It was JW. He was alive. He'd made it. I ran up. I gave him a big hug. Walked him back up to the house. He still knew heel. Even after 6 months, he remembered heel. Talked to my grandma and said, what happened? And she said, well, he was going to be Sunday dinner. But Friday night after you left, about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we heard all this really loud racket. And at first we thought a fox had gotten in with the chickens or something. And then we realized, nah, there was somebody down by the barn with the car. They were trying to rob us. And in the midst of it was your chicken. He was fighting them off. Where he learned karate, I do not know. But he was doing a good job, and Grandpa, of course, pulled the shotgun out, fired something in the air. They left and never came back. And Grandma said, well, after that, we just couldn't have them for Sunday dinner. I said, well, Grandma, I'm sorry you missed Sunday dinner. She said, well, we didn't. You only need one rooster. So Christmas was good, and then it was time to leave. And we walked out, got in the car, waved goodbye, and he waved goodbye. Started down the drive, and I said, Dad, stop for a second. Because he just looked so sad. And I got out of the car, and I did the only thing I could think to do. I straightened up. And when I did, his wing came up. Well, after we got back to Devens, my dad got orders to go to the Philippines for 3 or 4 years. My grandma wrote us about J-Dub. Apparently he learned and kept on heel with her also. And I just always remember him.
That reminds me that we do have a chicken festival coming up in January. There is a flyer in the back when you leave. You might pick that up. It's not a motel event, but it's a River and Prairie Story Weavers event. And we've been doing that for 26 years. So it'll be the 26th Chicken Festival. Bring a chicken story and a bucket of chicken. All right. Our next storyteller is Rich White. Now, he was on this stage last year in Kansas City, and he's with us. Oh, and he's got a chicken shirt.
I really didn't know what Gary's story was going to be.
How to pick up chicks. Ah. Is this high enough for you? Or deep enough? Rich White.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever notice that scientists sometimes try to make things better when they should just leave well enough alone? Back in the early days of gene research, the folks down at Texas A&M University created a new breed of chicken. They added turkey genes for bigger breasts. Not a bad idea, you know? But then they added porpoise genes for intelligence. Now I ask you, do we really need smarter chickens? And they added Texas Longhorn genes for, well, actually, I don't know why they added Texas Longhorn chickens. Maybe just because it was Texas. They called these new chickens Texas Leghorns. And these are the chickens my great Aunt Flo wanted when she decided to get into the chicken business. But you had to drive clear down to Texas to the hatchery to get these chickens, and Aunt Flo was getting along in years. So she asked me and my cousin Dave, who just happens to have one blue eye and one brown eye, she asked me and my cousin Dave to go down to Texas and make a chicken delivery for her. Well, we get the hatchery down there at Steep Holler, Texas. They load us up with 15 boxes of 100 chicks each in the back seat. They might have mentioned something about flimsy boxes, and they sent us on our way. Now, I'll admit, I was driving too fast up that winding road over one of the biggest hills in the state of Texas when we rounded a bend, and there, coming down the middle of the road towards us, was a truckload of chickens. Well, I jerked the wheel to right to avoid a collision, but the car went off the side of the road and down a steep embankment. We ended up on a road just down the hill from where we'd been. But that was the roughest, steepest quarter mile I have ever been on in a car. Those 15 flimsy boxes in the back seat, they all collapsed, freeing those 1,500 chicks. Well, Dave and I looked back there to survey the carnage we were sure we were going to find, but miraculously we only found 2 broken wings and 1 broken leg. And Dave, who'd been through EMT training, was able to set the broken bones and splint the broken limbs using some kitchen matches he happened to have in his pocket and a ball of kite string that had rolled out from under the seat on our trip down the hill. Once Dave got finished, he got out the map to see where this new road we were on went to. And when he did, one of the chicks jumped up on that map, started looking at it like he was studying the route we had marked. Now, this chick must have got a double shot of those Longhorn genes, because he was head and shoulders taller than the other chicks, kind of a mottled brown color, and this chick had spots on the side of his head that, well, they looked just pretty near like little horn nubs. And that chick jumped up on the dash-mounted rear-view mirror, sat right there in the middle, looking out the front like he was going to be our guide or something. And you know, it was so cute, we just started calling him Daniel Boone. Well, we got on our way, and we're coming up to our first turn, and Daniel goes over to the left side of the mirror and says, "Jeep, Jeep, Jeep." Now, I know it was pure coincidence, but he got that turn right. And it was even a bigger coincidence when he got the next 3 turns right, too. But like I say, I know it was pure coincidence. There is no way he could have remembered what our route was. Well, it was about this time I noticed we were getting a little low on gasoline. And then it hit me. We are not going to be able to get out of this car. We open a car door with 1,500 chicks running loose. I don't know if you've ever tried it or not. Some of them are sure to get out, and you'll never catch them once they get out running around. So we pulled into a full-service gas station to get our gasoline. And we talked the attendant into bringing us out 6 candy bars, 2 bottles of Pepsi Cola, 5 packs of Juicy Fruit chewing gum, because Dave was partial to Juicy Fruit, and 17 little bags of Fritos corn chips. Well, you know, the chicks looked hungry. We crumbled up the Fritos and spread them out so the chicks could get something to eat. And while we were stopped, we decided to switch drivers, which would have been a whole lot easier if we'd been able to get out of the car. But Dave and I we wiggled and we squirmed, and we finally got Dave in the driver's seat and me in the passenger seat. And I want to tell you, we did not squish a single little chick in the process, which was no easy feat. Well, we got back on the road. And we were making pretty good time. We'd crossed into Oklahoma. Coming up to Bug Tussle, we hear this racket coming from the back seat as 987 voices in unison are chanting, Jeep, 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 Jeep. Well, I looked back there to see what in the world was going on. And there, standing in formation across the back seat, the chicks had spelled out DRINK. I don't know. I guess it was the salty corn chips that made them thirsty. So we pulled into Sonic there in Bug Tussle. We didn't think it'd be a good idea to give Pepsi Cola to these little chicks, you know. So we ordered 5 large 7-Ups, an empty cup, and 9 extra straws. We pulled pinholes along the length of those straws, stuck the straws together end for end, stuck one end of that end of the empty cup, sealed all the joints with Juicy Fruit chewing gum, and had ourselves a drip watering system so those chicks could all get a drink. Well, once they got finished, why, we got back on the road. But we had not gone a quarter of a mile till Dave hit this big pothole. This pothole jarred us. Why, it jarred us so much, Dave's glass eye popped out and rolled on the floor. Now, we couldn't really see the eye because of all the chicks down there, but we could follow its path as the chicks were bowled over as it rolled back and forth. Well, sir, I finally caught the eye and was just getting ready to hand it back to David when we heard jeep, 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 coming from Daniel Boone. Dave looks up. What's he see? But another truckload of chickens. This one is stalled in the road right in front of us. Dave hit the brake with both feet. Chicks inside that car just flew everywhere. Dave's other glass eye popped out, but I caught it before it got to the floor. And remarkably, our car stopped before running into that truckload of chickens. Well, sir, I gave Dave back his blue eye and his brown eye, and he rinsed each one of them off in his mouth before popping it back in. Then he pulled the car over the side of the road, and that's when we noticed the crack in the windshield. And there, laying on the dash, was Daniel Boone, unconscious and not breathing. Well, Dave put his EMT training to use again, quickly started mouth-to-beak resuscitation. And Daniel Boone, that tough little old bird, was conscious and breathing on his own again in no time. But his horn nub had cracked that windshield. Daniel had a goose egg the size of a kidney bean on the side of his head. I cut off a strip of Kleenex, and Dave expertly wrapped it around Daniel's head, sealed it in place with a little wad of Juicy Fruit chewing gum, and we laid Daniel out there in the open Kleenex box to recuperate. Well, we hadn't even had time to get back on our way when what should come barreling down the road but a runaway gasoline truck. The driver of the truck had time to jump out just before that truck crashed in to that truckload of chickens and exploded. Luckily, we had a blanket in the car. We threw over all of our chicks so they didn't have to witness. as hundreds, if not thousands, of perfectly roasted chickens rained down out of the sky. We were there for better than 2 hours, while the town folks were there picking up those chickens and putting them in grocery sacks to take home. They finally got the road cleared. We made it back on our way. Made it the rest of the way to Aunt Flo's down there at Clark's Fork, just south of Boonville. I don't know if any of you know it or not. But when we got there, we asked Aunt Flo how we're supposed to get these chicks from the car into the chicken house without them getting loose and running all over the place. All Aunt Flo said was, "Chicken clucker!" and ran back in the house. Now, for any of you that don't already know, a chicken clucker is a yellow plastic chicken beak that fit over Aunt Flo's nose and mouth. And when Aunt Flo talked American into the chicken clucker, it translated whatever she said into chicken. Aunt Flo set the dial for Leghorn dialect, gave a few clucks, and those chicks all snapped to attention and started lining up in rows. Aunt Flo opened the back door, put up a board for a ramp, gave a few more clucks, and those chicks started marching down that ramp 2 by 2, led by Daniel Boone with his head all wrapped up, and Pegleg, who was now walking with a crutch made from the short end of a broken straw and held together with juicy fruit chewing gum. And they followed Aunt Flo right into that chicken house just as pretty as you please. Now, I'm sorry to report the chicken business did not work out as planned for Aunt Flo. By the time those chickens got big enough to sell, Aunt Flo was so attached to them she couldn't send them off to the slaughterhouse. Those chickens' genes were so messed up, none of them ever laid any eggs. And the expenses really started cutting into Aunt Flo's savings. And I'm not talking just chicken feed here. Those chicks learned to communicate better and they started asking for things. Things I don't think they made good use of. For example, I don't think a one of those chicks ever got past hunt and peck typing on those computers they had Aunt Flo buy. Though I have to admit, the royalties off that book they managed to peck out were a real godsend for Aunt Flo. And by the way, in case you're interested, I checked, they got a copy of the book here at the library. 1,500 Uses for Juicy Fruit Chewing Gum by Daniel Leghorn Boone. I thank you.
Yeah, right here in Boone County too, huh?
It was just an accident.
Just an accident. All right, our final storyteller in the oral category is Linda Kuntz. I think they must just tell stories back and forth all the time at their house. Welcome, Linda Kuntz from Gladstone, Missouri.
Growing up in Wisconsin meant it started snowing in October and maybe would taper down in May, though it had been known to snow July 4th. Well, I remember one day it had snowed an additional 7 feet of snow. And Mama woke us up that morning and said, "Girls, today is the day. You have entered the snow sculpture contest and you need to get out there and come up with something." Well, we put on every layer of wool clothing we could come up with. We put our feet in bread bags, slipped them into our rubber boots, and we all rolled out the second floor window and made our way to where the front door was, because our first chore was to shovel out a way to get into the front door. And then we were left to play and do whatever we wanted to do the rest of that day. So my sisters and I wanted to make the most spectacular snow sculpture. And being in Wisconsin, of course, we wanted to build a snow sculpture of Paul Bunyan and his Blue Ox Babe. Now, my oldest sister Jenny was sent out to keep an eye on us, and she was really, really good at that. And she was going to help us as we planned our sculpture. So at this part of the yard, there was just enough wood of the telephone pole sticking up above the snow that she pointed out that that would be the perfect part of Paul Bunyan's axe handle. And we started working on building our snow sculpture. Now, about that time, the neighbor boy Mark came over. Oh, he didn't want to help us with the snow sculpture. He wanted to play. So my sister Carol said, well, I know, let's make snowballs and see how many of those icicles we could knock off the roof. So Jenny said, go on, you guys can, knock snowballs, or take the snowballs, knock those icicles off. And then Jenny realized that Carol had only knocked off 4, and Mark had knocked off about 31. So she came over and she goes, now, let me show you how this is done. You need to make a bigger snowball, and you need to throw that snowball along the line of the eaves, and that way you'll knock off more icicles. And she left them to it. So then Jenny went over to the rest of us as we were trying to figure out just how to pose Paul Bunyan and his hooks. And we were trying to figure out how many ladders we were going to need to make this a life-size sculpture. Well, about that time, Mark and Carol had finished knocking all the icicles off, and they decided, what's next? Let's go sledding. So they were able to just walk onto the garage roof. It was a metal roof, and we had cleared the snow off so it wouldn't collapse, but that metal roof was the perfect sledding chute. So Mark and Carol got their sleds out, and they whizzed down that garage roof, sailed over the buried pear orchard, and they landed right between the ox's feet. So Jenny got them and says, oh, now you're getting in the way. Go sledding off the other side of the garage. So they were able to get their sleds untangled from the ox's feet, went back to the garage, and Jenny pointed out that if they went off on that side of the garage, that they would be able to turn at, bank at the snowdrift, and they'd end up at the barn. And so Mark and Carol were sledding in that direction. In the meantime, Jenny was trying to help us do the math of how many packages of blue Kool-Aid we were going to need to make that ox blue, and how were we going to sneak in the house and steal the Kool-Aid without Mom noticing. Well, about this time, Carol and Mark realized that down by the barn, the wind had blown all the snow off the ice, and there they could go skating. Well, nobody had skates, but they could slide back and forth. And so Carol and Mark started pushing each other on the ice. And the harder they pushed, the further they went. And they tried to do crack the whip, but it's kind of hard with 2 people. And so Mark suggested that if Carol pushed him and gave him a super duper push, that he would probably be able to go like all the way to the other side of the pond. So Carol gave him a super duper push, and when she opened her eyes, Mark was gone. Mark had fallen in the hole that some ice fisherman had come and cut a hole in the pond, and Mark had fallen in. So Carol called to help to Jenny, and Jenny, she knew exactly what she needed to do. She got some tow ropes and she snowboarded over to the pond to help Mark. Now, if you've ever been outside with multiple layers of wool, you'll realize wool is very insulating. The air keeps you warm. But another factor of wool clothing is it wicks away the moisture from your body. Well, here was Mark stuck in the pond, and that wool was a wicking, and he was blowing up like a giant marshmallow, and he was kicking his feet underneath the water trying to figure out how to get out. And he was kicking his feet so fast that he was sucking up walleye fish in his boots as he was kicking. Now, Jenny told him, hold still, I'm gonna tie this tow rope around you and you'll be just fine. So she tied a double half hitch knot around him. And then Carol and Jenny took the rope back up to the girls, threw it over the axe handle, and said, now girls, let's grab a hold of the rope and jump. And so we all grabbed a hold of that rope, and when we jumped and landed, with the force of all 13 girls landing, well, that's a whole nother story. There's not much to do when it's cold. The force of those 13 girls landing popped Mark out of that pond. He went sailing through the air, and he landed smack dab on that ox. And right there, a whole couple of things happened. He landed so hard, all those fish flew out of his boots. And my sisters and I were grabbing those walleyes for dinner later. He landed so hard on the back of that ox that every drop of water from his clothing was expelled. And that water rained down and mixed with that Kool-Aid, and it made that ox the perfect shade of blue. Now about that time, Mama opened the front door and hollered in, come on girls, it's time for lunch. So Jenny helped Mark down off the ox, untied him, and of course we invited him in. It's the only neighborly thing to do. We went in and had lunch of grilled Wisconsin cheese and a mug of hot tomato soup. Later after lunch we went out and we were pleasantly surprised to find out that the judging committee had snowmobiled by, looked at our masterpiece, and we won first prize.
Okay, now we've heard really some fantastic stories up here. 8 stories. We know it's going to be tough for these judges. I'd like all of the storytellers to come up so that the judges have a look at you again. Larry, with your PMS flight. Gary, hauling your dead father-in-law to the burial ground, and your chicken story of J-Dub. Roger, the Egyptian, can you walk like one? Alan DeBay with the spider. Miranda. Rachel on that canoe trip. You're gonna have fun. And Rich with the whole carload of chicks. And of course, Linda with the snow in Wisconsin. So, give them all a big hand. Now, in your mind, make up your mind about who you think is the winner. But we have 3 judges back there, and their word is law. We'll protect you later. I will, not these guys. Anyway, we're going to take some minutes, and we're going to talk about the written contest while the judges go into another room and deliberate. Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Let's go down, yes.
You would like us in the back.
I'll get a picture of you guys.
Roger, they want individual
Pictures for the newsletter.
Okay, while they're doing that, I'm going to talk to you about the written portion. Now, of course, you know, the writing, I'm going to lower this just a little. I feel like I'm looking through a microphone here. You know, I'm getting shorter too. It's just terrible. Oh. I never thought I would get shorter. I didn't think you could get shorter at my height. But the doctor says, well, I have osteoporosis. Now, there's a lie. I always feel big. We have 6 entries in the written contest. Some of these people thought if they didn't make it in the oral, they would certainly try the written. So, just for you to know, we have, well, Larry Brown has one in the written. Carol Cariotis actually won the first Liars Contest. I believe she took the oral contest 5 years ago. Gary Kuntz has a written story. Cozy Wright, a newcomer to us. Thank you. Alan DeBay and Alice Nathan. So I'm going to go to the back of the room and find out what the committee decided on the oral, on the written storytelling. And then the winner, there will be 3 winners. I know that you're wondering what the prizes are. We do have cash prizes for all of the winners, 3 in each category. And I will be right back. So relax for a couple of minutes and I'll see you in just a moment.
Are the written ones available online to read or anything like that?
They aren't yet, but we will put them up.
Oh, great.
We have to get permission from the
Right.
writers.
Mhm.